Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Nkrumah Mensah. She is a construction professional, and now she is a young adult novelist also, and she always inspires everyone to unleash their inner heroine. We'll talk all about this. Welcome to the show, Nkrumah.
Good morning, Ajay. How are you?
I'm very, very good. You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India
You,
in this
thank you.
online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll learn from you about your hidden manuscript, and now you are a published author. That led you to that. So, all that story we'll learn from you. Nkrumah, so tell us a bit about your journey, about your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Okay, well, actually, my background is pretty varied. I started writing when I was in probably middle school, but I didn't think I was any good at it. And I went to college, became an English major, got married, had children, did the whole life bit, landed myself in commercial construction, if you can believe it. And then one day, while my daughter was digging through some old boxes, old dusty boxes from a recent move, she found this novel I had written called Anne. And digging it out of the box, she brought it to me and said, "Mom, what is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just a story I wrote." And she was like, "May I read it?" So I told her to go ahead. It wasn't anything that I thought was going to go anywhere, but she read it, loved it, asked if she could share it with her friends. And once she shared it with her friends, it just took off. They all had questions for me. They wanted to know why it wasn't published. And I had to think to myself, well, why haven't I published this? Why didn't I think I was good enough?
Right. So why didn't you publish it? Because once your daughter read it, her friends read it, then it landed with Morgan James Publishing. So let us into that story of yours. Forget about the other stories in your book, but first let's yours understand your story. It's like a miracle. It's like those miracle writers who have written some book. Nobody read it, kept the manuscript, and later we read it today with great, curiosity.
And I think it's honestly because a lot of artists, we don't think what we do is important. So we do these things just for our own enjoyment. And it takes us a little extra push for someone to say, "Hey, we think this is something. Maybe you should try putting it out there." But putting out into the world something that is so precious to you, something that is a little piece of your soul, can be scary. So, luckily for me, I had my daughter and her friends backing me up, as well as a few of my friends in construction who read tidbits or heard me talking about it, saying, "Hey, this is a good idea." Then eventually, a guy that I knew in high school, I grew up with, he knew somebody at Morgan James that I could talk to, and just speaking with that person, letting him read my manuscript, he also agreed that I could have something here. And so this one book is now spinning off into a series. And I could have never imagined that I would be here 20 years ago.
20 years, a daughter, and
20 years ago.
and something called Morgan, James Publishing. So, do you ever think if it were not for your daughter or perhaps a friend, because your manuscript was good enough, not led to not one but two books, so if you did not have this daughter of yours and their friends reading about it, how would your life be? How do you look at that just by just keeping your 317 page new manuscript hidden into dust?
I think my life would be very boring right now. I don't know about you, Ajay, but I am going on all cylinders. You work out your daytime job and then you come home, and now I'm writing in the evenings, and I'm doing book events, and I'm speaking to people every day that I'm not at work. I am working on getting my story out there. So it's one thing after another, and doing all of this while raising children is tiring. It's very tiring, but it's exciting. I'm excited. And I think that if my daughter hadn't found my novel, I don't know if I'd be here right now. I really don't. So it's
Right.
real. It's all thanks to her and her desire to read that I am here.
Right, Nkrumah. So I want your message for those writers who write well or whatever they write and they hide it. They hide behind whatever veils they want to hide, behind whatever walls they want to hide. And what would you want to tell them? Nowadays, there are so many options also. The manuscript does not have to lie anywhere. Now, there are so many places where you can publish. You can publish just a single chapter, ask others to contribute, so many things. What would you like to tell? At least publish. I want to understand your advice.
Well, I will. So let me say this. First of all, for any writers out there, number one, get started. I meet people all the time who say, I have a story, I want to write a book, but I don't know how. The first thing you need to do is just write something down. Just get started, because that first sentence can lead to anything. You just never know. Then the second thing I would say is trust the people around you. Okay, you want to open up to the people around you. Trust that maybe you do have something. It is surrounding yourself by a group of supporters that helps push you to the next level. And then, like you said, there's so many ways to get published now. And Anna Survivor and the Anne series hopefully is going through Morgan James Publishing all the way through. But I have another book that I'm working on that does not fit the Morgan James platform. That book will have to be published elsewhere. And I think I'm going into a self publishing mode for that one. So there's so many ways that you can do this. And I honestly started on free platforms. I was on Wattpad, I was on Tapas, and that just putting that out there helped me gauge whether or not young adults and adults would even be interested in my story. So my first push was my daughter and her friends. My second push was Wattpad and Tapas. And then my third push was a guy I grew up with in high school. So it wasn't, for authors out there, it wasn't just me. It was me on the paper, but it was the choir of support around me that gave me the push to get to where I am.
Right, right, Nkrumah. So, that is where I mentioned also in the introduction of yours. Unleash your inner heroine. Is there a special message for women writers out there? What do you want to tell them? Help us understand what does it mean by being your unleashing your inner heroine.
In Unleashing my Inner Heroine. Okay. Well, I like to write about strong female characters, and in doing so, it helps me connect to the bravery and the courage within. I do not feel that I am Anne in any way, shape, or form. There are things that she does that I would never do. But like a character is not yourself, it is more like, for me, my characters are like children. They have a piece of you, but then they also have the hopes that and dreams that you would want to have for them. And I put into Anne all the courage and all the bravery that maybe I lack. And in putting it in her, then it reflects back to me like, okay, maybe I should be braver. Maybe I should be more courageous. Maybe I should take a step forward and take a chance. And she takes all the chances before I do, which then gives me the courage to take the chances within my own life. So I
Ab-
think that's about read about heroines and then become the heroines.
Absolutely, absolutely. First, create the heroine in your mind and then become that heroine.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's learn about Anne. Anne of Survivor. Why Anne of Survivor? Tell us about this headline and
Okay.
this particular title, and then you talk about Anne of Ryland. Help us understand about your piece.
Okay. So the reason for the title and of Survivor. Survivor is a ship. And I know that people get confused about that. They're like, she is a survivor. Maybe she's trying to survive. The Survivor's an actual ship. So it's Anne of Survivor because Anne in the story, she's going through a difficult time where she's trying to decide whether she's going to be herself or she's going to mold herself into what society expects of her. And in the end, she chooses to leave the societal norms behind and seek out her own life and her own destiny. And to do that, she joins a merchant ship called Survivor. And in that way, she can travel around to various islands and meet new people and do new things. The thing about Anne's story, however, is that it's written from a late 1500s to early 1600s. So it wasn't really easy for women to move around on their own at that time. So she does dress as a young man and takes on the name Andrew Palace so that she can go discover the world. Now, Anne of Ryland is Anne's home. So Survivor, she leaves home. Anne of Ryland suggests that she comes back home. Now, what she does when she comes home, it may or may not, I don't want to give it away, may or may not conform to society. Maybe she changes society. Maybe society changes on its own. I'm not going to let you know. You got to read the book.
Right. So this is the same manuscript that you wrote 20 years back.
Yes.
And it was one manuscript that was just Anne, and then it became
It
Anne of Survivor, Anne of Ryland.
Yes, because 317 pages, Times New Roman, 11 point, single spaced, I found out was too large a manuscript for young readers. So we broke it into two. It's still a nice size book. I mean, this is Anne. It's still a nice size reader for young adults. And Anne of Ryland is slightly larger. So it's a nice size book for a book one and a book two. And from there, it spins off to other people's stories within the book. So I'm currently writing book four, and I believe this is going to be a 7-book series.
Right. So Anne of Survivor, that is already out. Anne of Ryland, end of 2025, next year.
I believe December of 2025 next year, yes.
Right. So Anne of Survivor, tell us about this, because you wrote it when it was 20 years back. And at that point in time, it was a different time altogether.
Yes,
Uh, you looked at life differently. Did
I
you want
did.
that to tell the world about Anne, or through your book, you wanted to be someone called Anne? Tell us a bit about your motivation at that point in time. Though officially you tell that it was for a friend you wrote it.
Well, so the reason I wrote Anne in the first place, which this will reach out to you, Ajay, is an Indian friend of mine, and she was going through an arranged marriage, and I was like, well, what if you run? What if you don't get married and we run off and we get jobs and we get an apartment somewhere in San Francisco? She did not do this. she got married. And I will say my friend now, she's great. She's happily married. She's got 2 kids. But at the time we were fresh out of college, 18 years old, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if you just got out of there? So I wrote the story about a girl who runs away from an arranged marriage. I wrote it for my friend Uba, and that was my only, it was for her. It really wasn't for the world at large. I will say that at the time that I wrote it, it was from a young girl's point of mind. I started writing it at 18. I finished it at the age of 23. It was before I had children. So, from that frame of mind, it was all about what Anne wanted and what Anne was doing. But when I reread it as an adult, now I have kids and I had a little more sympathy for her parents. I was like, wow, Anne's a little mean. Now, granted, kids who are 18 and through their 20s, they tend to be a little more within themselves. They're still trying to discover who they are. So the outside world is on the back burner while they're, so it's a very self-centered time. And I understand that. And that's where I was when I wrote the book. But when I did a reread and I was working through it again, I had to put in a little more sympathy for her parents because she was mean. She was always thinking about herself. And there is a moment in time when her parents appear to be thinking about themselves only. But to me, it's not them thinking about themselves. They were thinking about how best to protect their daughter in the future, how best to set her up for success within the society in which they lived in the future. And so there are no good or really bad people in the story. They're just people who do good or bad things. And I hope that comes across to people through the not just the first novel but the second novel, is that these are just people and they're trying to do what's best for them. And with Anne, she is a powerhouse. She is Anne, and even though she does what's right for her, she's a good person, and she realizes it through taking care of other people that her parents weren't all bad as well.
Right, right. So, who is Anne and what can the present generation, you wrote when you were yourself at that stage in life. Now, what is it that people like in Anne, your daughter liked in, her friends liked in Anne? What is it that you would want to tell the present generation through Anne?
To tell them, and to me, is any young girl of that age. And I wanted to tell them, one, society does exist. It is something that you have to face. Two, don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself and be your most authentic self without all the noise that comes from without, whether it be your parents, your friends, your teachers, your bosses, whoever it is. Find out who you are and then let people know who you are without any fear and with pride. So I wanted to show them that you can do that, but you can also do it with moderation. Anne doesn't do it with moderation in the beginning. She goes full force, but then she has to learn what happens from that. There's a cause and effect to everything that we do. And Anne's running away was had huge effects that ripple not just through her family, but through the entire empire, the entire kingdom. So she not only has to deal with society once she leaves, she has to deal with her actions within that society. So I want young girls to recognize that, yes, be yourself, but understand that there's a cause and effect to everything you do. And take into consideration, this is how society runs. And if you're going to go against it, be prepared for whatever society kicks back. If you're prepared for it and this is really what you want, go get it. If it's not, if you cannot handle the backlash, maybe find another approach. But always try to be true to yourself and find what destiny fits the life that you want to lead. Because at the end of the day, it's not your parents living your life, it is you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and maybe Nkrumah is actually, it is the same thing that both the parents, both the and the youngsters, they are talking about the same thing, except that the way at the speed at which the young generation may want to do or are doing, they just need to understand that their parents' processor is a bit slower than that. And they need to process it in their own way. You are processing it at your own speed, which they are not getting it. And so give that data to them in a way that they are able to process it. And you will find that it's the same thing that they also want for you. And for yourself also,
Exactly.
if you move at very high speed, maybe you will miss the wood for a few trees. And actually,
Exactly. So, like I said, in the beginning of Anne, she's full force. In the towards the end, she realizes moderation is probably the key, and she could have skipped a lot of heartache if she had perhaps had a better conversation or a conversation. She didn't really have a conversation. Just a conversation with her parents could have avoided a lot of trauma.
absolutely. And in your case, when you thought of, a strong character, strong thing, and then imbibing that character within you, you are into construction industry. And that's
Yes.
not for everyone. It's a tough industry. And earlier on, less women were there. You are there, you are working, you've been there for several years now, if I understand. So
Yes.
that shows that actually your book came later on, but Anne came within you much, much earlier, perhaps the time you desired it to come to you.
Exactly, exactly. And like you said, there's not a lot of women in construction. We tried to focus on women in construction. It is a very difficult field to be in. I'm not on the ground. I'm not in the field. I'm in the office with coordination. I used to do some project management, and it's difficult to work with all the pieces and get everything to come together and get everybody working together, not just your team but also subcontractors coming into the site. It's an art form to get everybody working in the same way at the same time to get a project done on time and hopefully under budget. So it's a challenge, and it is a man's world. In more ways than one. But I think that my being there is all the more exciting because I, I'm also a minority in more ways than one. So I bring a little something different to the office. Hopefully,
Indeed.
good
The
things.
Absolutely. And the world is changing. Things change. And the speed of change is much, much faster than it used to be earlier on. One,
Exactly.
yeah. One more thing I want to discuss about this is the young adult, in terms of their choices. A lot of people say young people do not have the time. They are mostly on their phones, looking at things, doing whatever. Parents are worried. Everyone seems to be worried about them. But at the same time, I see this young adult fiction or writing is actually growing up. A lot of these writers are coming. It means this particular generation or a genre, they like to read that stuff, except that you can't push them something that they don't want to, so they are reading. So should we understand that this young people of ours, they are interested in reading, but you should know what to give to them. Just do not give everything like they used to. It used to be different time. Are you Their time will come to read those serious things. What is your take on this?
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I meet lots of young people who are interested in Anne, and honestly, I'm meeting young people, but I'm also meeting older people. So I think the young adult genre is growing not just because of young adults, but because of adults that are interested. And I think that having adults interested in something that can go ahead and introduce it to a young adult in a way that they would be interested is another way to get them interested in reading. Are kids reading? Kids are reading. Kids are reading. It just depends on what they're reading. I will admit, my eldest daughter, she reads a lot of novels. She reads a lot of novels, and I think that's a beautiful thing. My younger daughter and myself, we are both dyslexic. I did not read when I was younger, Ajay. I did not read. It was not enjoyable for me. And it was not enjoyable for my younger daughter who takes after me. However, you just have to find something that they'll be interested in reading just to crack the door open a little bit. And if you can crack that door open, then they'll find something else that they want to read. So I talked to people and they were like, well, my kid reads manga or my kid reads web comics and I can't get them off their phone because they're reading manga or web comics. I'm going to tell you right now, I read manga, I read web comics, right? But I also read the classics. I'm currently reading Shakespeare. Why? Because I
Right.
have to it's part of my research for my book. But
And you love
that
Star
being
Trek also. You love Star
I
Trek. You
love
see,
Star Trek.
science and
I
Shakespeare.
love Star Trek.
Science and Shakespeare. Science fiction and Shakespeare. Great.
I've got the anime, I've got the Star Trek, I've got the manga, I've got the Shakespeare. So I'm all over the place. But I wouldn't have gotten to where I am in my passion and love for reading if it hadn't come from reading something. I will admit it was really trashy. My mom had these romance novels that were like really trashy romance novels, and I read one and I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then I read another one, and then I started reading some science fiction, and that's how my love of reading grew. So back then, if I was reading and I told somebody, "Oh, I'm reading this romance novel," that was considered really lowbrow reading. But guess what? I also love Toni Morrison. I love Shakespeare. I love all these other great authors and authoresses. And that started with a romance novel that I can't even tell you the name of. So, whatever they're reading, just let them read. And like I said, my daughter's dyslexic too, and I understood that. So when she started reading web comics. I didn't say stop reading web comics on your phone. I said, what are you doing on your phone? Okay, you're not on any sites that you shouldn't be on. You're reading web comics. Okay, what kind of web comics? Get interested in what they're reading, be interested in who they are, and that encourages them to expand. And so she started with on webtoons, and now she reads light novels. So it has to start somewhere. Just get them started. They are reading.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nkrumah, you are absolutely right. The importance of reading. People generally think I've done more than 1,500 live shows. People think I read a lot. Nowadays, I don't get. But now, when I look back, every little bit of thing that I've read, in the times when there was no internet, nothing, every bit of paper that I read, or even Shakespeare we used to read in school, everything comes to life when I remember such things, whenever it comes to that discussion. And if you read today, maybe you will forget. But those things, on those days when actually you used to enjoy, those things keep on, holding you strong in whichever
Yes.
position is there in your life. And if it were not, perhaps those things that I read those days, which did not mean much for others, I would not be talking to you, Nkrumah. I would not be learning from you. I would not be learning from hundreds, more than 1,500 people that I have talked on my show till now. So that I understand it. I understand
I
when you say read what you like, and others also should participate in it. The people who are closer to them. And then they will all find that it's only the, as I said, the processing speed, but it's actually the same thing that we all are talking about.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, I never, when I was, if you talked to me in junior high school, I would have never believed that I would have a bookcase in my home, right?
Right.
So not only do I have one bookcase, I have several. So just get them reading and whatever it is, be interested. I think honestly, and I think this comes through in Anne as well, is kids are people too. Kids are people too. And they have their own minds and their own beliefs. And do we influence them? Yes, we do. But in the ways that we're not influencing them, we need to listen. We need to listen and take in what they're saying. Don't disregard it right offhand. Take in what they're saying and then have a constructive conversation. I'm going to say 100. I have two really great daughters and I have great stepkids and I've got, believe it or not, 6 grandchildren. So I listen to all of them as much as I can and just try to be a sounding board, because if you're listening to them, then they're telling you things that even their words aren't saying. And it's what they're not saying in the whole of what they are saying that's also very important. And if you do that and you're interested in them, then you can help guide them to the future that they want for themselves. And hopefully it's a good one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell us a bit about your other books that you said you may have to self publish, or other publishing houses are publishing any of your other books.
So my other novels are, they are romantic comedies. They're not 50 Shades of Grey. I'm going to put that out there right now. Not 50 Shades of Grey. It's more like 35. And Morgan James is a very clean publisher. So they're not going to publish anything with swearing or intimacy that is in these other books. So those books I'm going to publish myself, just so that I have the knowledge. I think that it's very good to, I've now been through the publisher process. I want to see what it's like to do the self-publishing process. And that way I have my hands around what the entire process looks like. That book will probably not be published under my name, Nkrumah Mensah, because I don't want my young adult readers to get mixed up into something far more adult. Not only that, but young adult is my specific genre. It's the genre that I am most comfortable in writing. My other books, they were they were a challenge. My ex-husband challenged me and I said, I can do this. And with the support of a junior high school friend of mine, not even, I mean, I've known this woman now for more than 30 years. But she gave me the idea. My ex-husband gave me the fire. So I wrote this romantic comedy, which is, I think, both funny and endearing all at the same time. But Morgan James, as a publisher, they publish clean novels, and so this isn't something I can put through to them. I'm not sure I want them to read it either. Like I
Right.
said, it's still 35 shades. It's not 50, but it's still kind of sexy.
Absolutely. There is so much to learn from you about publishing, about all these things, about WA novels and all, YA novels and all. So, for those people who want to learn more about you, from you, about YA publishing, and also about the new books that are coming, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, you can connect with me on Instagram at the Nkrumah Mensah, or you can go to my website, www.between-the-line.com. heroine.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Ajay. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.